Welcome to the show. Happy Friday. It is Sandy and Shawn. Sandy Club is off today. Cody Roark, as he has been every single day at training camp with us to start the program. Cody, thanks so much. Feels a little bit like senior day. The last day of training camp, you get the joint practice between the Packers and the Broncos. But a couple changes here, and as you pointed out, you warned about it really last week, the idea that the joint practices might be a little bit different after a spat over with the New York Giants, and now the league levies some heavy fines when there are spats. And so that's going to alter the trajectory of this practice between the Broncos and the Packers, unfortunately.
Yeah, we just, that was part of a media scrum. We just met with Matt LaFleur, Packers head coach, probably about 30 minutes ago, and we were talking pre-practice. The number one thing he said is that he and Shawn talked about, they want to reduce altercations. They don't want any of that stuff. Matt LaFleur has talked to his team about it. Shawn's talked to his team about it. The thing that stands out to me, though, is interesting. Matt LaFleur said no one-on-ones between wide receivers and DBs because, that right there is trying to prevent altercations, but yet there will be one-on-ones with the offensive line and defensive line.
That's where they tend to scrap more.
That's where it's more physical.
Right.
Like, you're going to get competition between wide receivers and DBs, but the most contact, you got to think about it. It's press. Right? When you're in press situations, you only have within 5 yards. Mm-hmm. After that, it's a penalty. So it's like there's not going to be as much contact with that. So to me, I was like, really? Come on, Matt. Like, why would you do that? But, I get it. You want to reduce chippiness. Everyone's trying to get better. Like the Broncos offense and defense, they're going to get a different look. The Packers, vice versa. They're going to get a different look than what they've seen all throughout camp. It is going to be competitive. I feel like the one-on-ones between the receivers and DBs, that is must-see practice stuff here. And I think you get good evaluations. You get different route concepts. You go against different guys that might have a different release. That, these guys out here for the Broncos, they've been out here practicing against Denver's wide receivers forever. They might know what Cortland Sutton or Tim Patrick's first release is in comparison to, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. So I just think there's a lot of things to monitor here. Obviously, it's going to be competitive. There might be some chippiness. I don't expect there to be a lot, though. And look, I think that we've seen some teams around the league say something along the lines of, I think it was Gerard Mayo said, if you get into a fight as a starter, you're playing all of the preseason. You're playing the whole preseason game. So it's like, all right, some guys don't want to play in the preseason. Right. So I don't know if Shawn or Matt have had that conversation.
We did see Sean Payton a couple times near the tail end of practice yesterday bring the all-hands meeting, everybody in the huddle. And since they came to the tail end of practice, I presume some of it probably was to that point. Hey, tomorrow, this is what we're going to be facing. This is what we need to think about. Be smart. You want to come out without injuries. You don't want to get the franchise in trouble. Obviously, that's important. And you don't want to come away with anybody, obviously, pointed out before, injuries.
And they talked about that last night in their team meeting, that they had after dinner. And look, this is the end of training camp. A lot of people won't be here next week in terms of there's a lot of media that comes out for training camp. There won't be a lot. It'll be just like the regular, like the reporters and people who cover it. But Shawn has been very consistent with his message, just like, hey, let's be smart. Like our goal is to get to the regular season. And look, I think the one thing he wants to avoid is discipline penalties. That's one thing he said a couple of weeks ago. So, a lot of that's going to factor into this game. Yes, it's practice, but how you practice is also, indication of like where your composure is in the midst of a game if, it's physical. So I'm excited about it. There's going to be a lot of good competition, a lot of good energy here. Broncos fans are very excited. It seems like, you can see a lot of green too. So it's like not 50-50, like it's predominantly orange. But there is green.
Packers fans travel. We know that, and they're kind of everywhere.
Maybe the skirmishes happen up there.
Could be. But a couple questions about that, obviously. When you talk about the offensive defensive line interplay, that will be ones against ones. And you talk about the penalties of discipline. The Broncos with a couple false starts, holding again on the offensive line in the first preseason game. I'm not going to name names, but let's just say if you were thinking of who might have had a false start and who might have had a holding based on the last season, yes, same people. So you're running into the same kind of issues.
Got to get that cleaned up.
That seems like that's got to get cleaned up in his second year. But with Bo Nix taking the majority of the snaps, he'll start on Sunday night. That will be, again, not against many of the Packers starters. LaFleur said he doesn't intend on playing them. And the wide receiver competition, which is pretty tight here. One of the rooms where there's a lot of – it's difficult to separate. How much does the fact that LaFleur's not going to be playing those one-on-one interactions actually set the Broncos back? I mean, it's one practice.
Yeah, no, it doesn't set them back at all. I mean, the reality is these guys, the first-team offense, first-team defense, are going to go against each other today. So that's really where the evaluation is going to be weighed. One-on-ones are nice, but also you factor in there's no pass rush in one-on-ones. So
Right.
no, I mean, you want to see that because it's a good competitive period, but really the bulk is going to come in all these team reps that we are going to see here today.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to watch, obviously, for the Denver Broncos as they get it going. The final practice of training camp for everyone who's out here, by the way, expect to be record highs in Denver today. So it doesn't feel much like football outside, but it definitely inside Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. It looks like football. The Broncos and Packers get ready to get it going in the final practice, joint practice. We'll see what they get before the preseason game on Sunday. And Cody, you've got to get going because you've got some stuff to cover. So we appreciate it. Follow Cody for all the latest, obviously, over at Mile High Sports, and check out the Locked On Broncos podcast.
Check out the post-practice report. We'll write it up at Mile High Sports and also do video reports on social media. So you want to see a little bit of the action outside of the plays. We have a filming period. We're allowed to shoot. We have a period where we're not allowed to shoot, but I always have a recap for you. Check it out, Mile High Sports. Boom.
All right, he's got to get out of here. Obviously, he's got practice going today, and he's got to go check that out. But the Broncos stretching the Packers, you may have heard, just came out onto the field. So we'll see a lot going on there for this joint practice today. Starting out, obviously, you expect to see certain things from Bo Nix, who appears to be in a position to take over this role. It looks like it was always going to be the case. We've been telling you for a while. There is not a quarterback competition. There was never a quarterback competition. This was always about when Bo Nix was ready. And as expected, as we've been telling you, with 61 career starts in college under his under his belt, Bo Nix is ready to make the leap. The question will be, it's in college under his belt, Bo Nix is ready to make the leap. The question will be, what exactly kind of quarterback will he become? What's the ceiling? The floor is pretty high. And that's one of the things with George Paton and drafts in the last couple of years the Broncos have focused on. And you look at the draft picks from this year, there's no exception. Peyton looks for guys that can, at the bare minimum, make your 53 and be on special teams and still contribute to the overall team futures. And that's the plan. That's something that's really valuable because over the years prior to that, when John Elway was more in charge of the drafting, Elway's style, and it is a style, Al Davis did it for decades. Plenty of teams do the same thing. The 49ers are still reeling a little bit from their choice of trading him to get Trey Lance because they were thinking about the ceiling. There's a long history in the NFL of people who are drafting that try to find Hall of Famers, they try to find superstars, they try to find Pro Bowlers with every single one of their draft picks. Now, nobody ever does that, and it is a valid approach. It really is. And I think for a lot of Broncos fans talking over the years, that's an approach that some of them, quite frankly, favor. You're looking for stars. You're looking for Tom Brady or Terrell Davis in the sixth. That's what you want to be doing, and that's all well and good. But the reality is your odds on making that happen are very low. And if any of the other teams had known who Terrell Davis was going to become or who Tom Brady was going to become, I assure you, they weren't going to last to the sixth. So some of that, truthfully, is a bit of luck and good timing. So I think that the way that George Paton approaches the draft and Sean Payton approaches the draft, because they do work in concert, is probably not only the better way to go, but it's definitely the better way to go when you're a team that's rebuilding like the Denver Broncos. Because what you need to do first is stock the roster with guys that you know can at least play at the NFL level and help your team. So that's an important part of the discussion. And what you've seen with the Broncos in the last two drafts seems to bear that out. You have a lot of players who can make this team, who should make this team, who can participate at bare minimum on special teams, and might even not be guys on the practice squad. But the Broncos start filling the roster, and you can't have those guys that can't make the team at all. Over time, those create gaps. And they create gaps you have to fill either by obtaining more draft picks, which you can't always do, or free agency. And that's where it comes back and bites you. Because when you're putting Band-Aids over each of these, the spots on the roster that you weren't able to fill with the draft, eventually the bill starts becoming too high. That's why you have a salary cap league. That's the intent behind it, to keep people from spending more than the others. So that needs to be part of this equation. And when you look at what the Broncos have done in the last couple drafts, they are stacking year after year of guys that can make the roster. And you find the stars where you can find the stars. You usually look at it and realize in the first 3 rounds of the draft, that's where most of the NFL starters come from. Stars tend to come from the first. Can they come from anywhere? Yes. Do they tend to come from the first? Also, yes. So for the Broncos, the idea of stacking things up and getting stars, if we're in a last couple of years where they haven't had first-round picks, that's been tough. So you have to go ahead and do what you can to make sure that you build the roster as thoroughly as you can and build it from the inside so you have consistently have that flow. You think about contracts, right? When certain guys hit free agency, you're not going to keep all of them. You want to be able to keep the ones you can afford, and then you want to be able to replace the ones you think you can replace with lower salary guys. It's just the way the business works. So you constantly have a churn when you're talking about the salaries of the players that are become veterans and become a little more pricey, or when you're talking about the young draft picks that find themselves at an inexpensive cost that are hungry and looking to make the team. That's something that a team that's further along can do. You look at the Chiefs, you look at the Ravens, you look at the Niners, you look at the Eagles, you look at the Bills, those kind of teams that have had pretty consistent success over the last few years. They had their stars, and certain players bubble up, and you decide we're not going to keep them anymore. That could be guys that have finished out their rookie contract that are set to make big jumps, or it could be the Tyreek Hills of the world who are already superstars and everyone knows how great they are. But at the same time, you believe you've got enough on your roster that you can replace a guy like that. Maybe not every year and maybe not all the time, but you can do it. And the Broncos haven't been at that point in a long, long time. They are just starting that now when you're talking about being on that road. And that's obviously a good sign, but it is still closer to the beginning of this rebuild than it is to the end of this rebuild. Obviously, if Bo Nix can become the kind of player that the Broncos hope that he can be, the occasional Pro Bowler, I don't think the Broncos believe Bo Nix is going to be a Hall of Famer or a superstar, and there's quite frankly no reason to think that it would. Doesn't mean he can't, of course. Nobody, when Tom Brady was drafted, thought Tom Brady was going to be a Hall of Famer, so it can happen. But in Nix's case, you have a guy that can step in and play immediately. That has value, obviously. And then when you're talking about the idea of where he goes from here, well, that's really up to Bo Nix, isn't it? And you bet on the guy, you bet on the person, you bet on your coaching, and you see where that goes. But the Broncos know right now that Bo Nix already is the best quarterback on this roster. He's the best quarterback they've had since Peyton Manning retired, and he hasn't even started a game for the Broncos. That's how it turns out. Now, we wouldn't have said that if Russell Wilson had not crashed and burned here in Denver, but he did, and it just didn't work out. But the bar Nix has to clear is incredibly low. And I think fans sense it because you look up on the berm where everyone is sitting and watching training camp, all training camp long. Up until this week, you saw the occasional smattering of number 10s. Now it's replete with them. Top to bottom 10 jerseys everywhere. And that's because Nix and the Broncos have given them something to believe in again. Whether that turns into something that leads to the playoffs, I highly doubt it. I think they're still a long ways from that. But optimism obviously reigns supreme this time of year. And what's important is the Broncos, for the first time in a long time, are headed in the right direction. Want to remind you that all of our training camp coverage out here at Broncos Park has been brought to you by our friends at Rolling Smoke. You want the best barbecue in town, they've got it. You can check out everything that they're putting together over at Rolling Smoke, but you better do it early because this is the kind of barbecue place. They're not making it all day long. They smoke it. It takes all hours to do it. And then when it's gone, it's gone. It's fresh every day. And when it's sold out, it's sold out. So you can check it out at 4 different locations, obviously. You can look at the Stanley Marketplace. Just follow your nose. It's right in the middle. You can't miss it. You can look up at the Golden Mill. You can look at Dry Creek in Centennial. That's opposite of Arapahoe High School. That's where you'll find me, close to the Mile High Sports Studios. Or you can check it out, the newest location, 38th Avenue in Wheat Ridge. And while you're at a concert up at Red Rocks, you can always check it out there. Skip the nachos and hot dogs, all that stuff. Go get yourself some top quality barbecue from Rolling Smoke. You can order online, pick it up, make it easy, whether you want to cater or just grab something for the family on a football weekend. Check them out at RollingSmokeBBQ.com. We'll be back for more. Got a terrific show for you. The final day of training camp for Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. I'm Shawn Drotar. We'll be back in a moment with Mile High Sports. Obviously, if you're self-employed and have trouble getting a home loan, want to let you know about SCL Mortgage. Obviously, you've heard about them for years, and you need to reach out to SCL Mortgage. They've helped thousands of self-employed people refinance their mortgage or buy a home with their bank statement loan and no tax returns needed. SCL understands the challenges of being self-employed, and you can find them at myspecialmortgage.com or call 303-790-2222. That's 303-790-2222. SCL's been serving Colorado successfully for more than 23 years, so give them a call today if you're self-employed and looking for a mortgage. Visit them at myspecialmortgage.com, NMLS number 1200716. Joining me, as you can see right here to my left, is Denver Post's Troy Renck, the host of the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck, by the way, on the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. New one just dropped literally a few minutes ago, Troy, where you had a chance to talk with Devon Bailey. Of course, you had a story about him in the Post as well. An interesting story, and one of the guys that I think at camp, and we're talking about one of the few guys at camp that seems like almost day in and day out, he did something that the rest of us all in the media are sitting here talking to each other and go, did you see him again? Here he goes.
Yeah, he's a remarkable story. 7th round pick. He's older. He went on a mission after high school, LDS mission. He had no college scholarship offers, and he was humbled by that. And he ended up doing his mission in Samoa. Actually baptized a distant relative there, but he came back, still no offers, walks on at Utah, and then he stayed through the extra year of COVID. So essentially he was 7 years removed from high school. He's like a year younger than Lamar Jackson, who's entering his 7th season. But the maturity, he told me, it changed his life. It's put him in this position. Obviously, the clock's ticking. Unfortunately for Vele, he has a bit of either a quad or knee issue, so he's not out here today. Let's hope it's nothing that has to be fixed that would prevent him from making the 53-man. But he, for me, was a lock to make it health willing. And like you said, he had a one-handed catch at one point in camp that the shades of Odell Beckham.
We watched it. It was right here in this corner, right in front of us.
Put that big paw up and fell down. And I mean, it's funny. Sean Payton has a type when it comes to receiver. They look like a basketball team. They're all 6'4", 210. Outside of Marvin Mims, they all look the same. I mean, like it looks like they're all going to be the three or the basically the sprint forward on a basketball team. But Vele is an easy guy to root for. Let's hope he's healthy. But what a story! If he's healthy, I think he makes the team. I don't think there's any question.
Well, let's look at that wide receiver group because there is a lot of talent there. And I think when you talk about Vele, I agree. I think that he's, if healthy, a lock. I think you have to look at what his ability is. And yeah, you're right. They all look like Tim Patrick, right? I mean, for the most part. And some obviously a little bit faster. And Troy Franklin hasn't really been able to get a lot of traction going. Some of that has to do with the normal rookie stuff. When you're used to sort of just being faster than the guys you're playing against at Oregon, obviously they were a tremendous team in the semifinals for the college championship, and a lot of times you can just run by guys. So press coverage, bump and run, these are things that Franklin has to adjust to. But I don't look at it and think there's a concern. I think he'll get it. He's a rookie and it takes time. But I do wonder about Mims. Last year, the Broncos were excited about Mims. Last year, there was plenty of room to work Mims in, yet it was unusual if he ever broke a quarter of the offensive snaps. Now, with the sort of Peyton pattern of wide receivers, the big-bodied guys, I do wonder if Mims' value to this team isn't really more in the return game, and the Broncos are focusing on that rather than being a receiver.
Yeah, I mean, you're on to something there. If you watch how he's being used, if he's going to make an impact as a receiver, it's going to be the 2 catches for 50 yards. He's not someone that's going to receive a lot of targets, but his speed still matters. On that play where he had turbo motion and stays flat and has that touchdown pass from Bo Nix, that's where his speed is different. He can get past the guy in motion, and it was that's a difficult pass, but that's that and deep vertical.
Right.
He is a vertical threat. You got to get to, and that's where I think he still needs to be involved because that threat opens up the middle of the field. It forces teams to make tough decisions in the run game if they know they can beat over the top. But he hasn't popped in camp. I thought with Judy gone, we would see him pop in camp. And in fact, it's been the opposite. He's been frustrated a lot of days. That's why it was nice to see him kind of break through in the Colts game, at least with the one big play. But for me, you talk about the receiving room. You've got Cortland Sutton's the 1. Josh Reynolds is the 2. Marvin Mims is 3 or in terms of locks. Tim Patrick's on the bubble. He's either 4 or not on the team. And then Vele's 5. And I think you keep Franklin because you drafted him.
And moved up to draft him.
But if it was just on merit, he wouldn't make the team. But I think they see a longer term vision with him in his second and third year. He could be a guy. But that means little Jordan Humphrey, Philip Dorsett, Brandon Johnson. I mean, a couple of those guys, like little Jordan Humphrey, he's got to be on the team. Watch his camp. I'm like, I would agree, but the fact is they did it last year where he will likely get through to the practice squad. Receivers rarely get claimed at the end of camp. And when they would move him up from practice squad, he's essentially moving up and he's second on the depth chart.
Right.
So it wasn't like he's moving up and he's the 6th receiver. He was moving up, and on game day, he was like the 2nd option. So I think Sean Payton showed he could manipulate that on game day. I think they could do that with tight end. I think they could that at receiver. I think frankly they could do that at offensive line, because I wrote today in the Denver Post, I am increasingly believing they're going to carry 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm inclined to believe that too, for the reasons that there's just no way to slide either Stidham or Wilson through the practice squad, even though the new rules allow you to elevate a guy and he doesn't count against you don't expose him to waivers over many times. But if you're Minnesota already, you've lost your quarterback. You don't want either Stidham or Wilson as a backup in your building. You might. And we know the quarterback injuries are a problem across the league. The average usage was slightly over 2 per team last year.
Right.
So I think they have to keep 3 as well. But we didn't even mention Brandon Johnson, who was 2nd on the team in touchdown receptions last year and is still a young guy. So there's a lot of talent there. But the Mims thing interests me, because I think a lot of people look at Mims and think, wow, the Broncos are going to be throwing downfield bombs to him all game long. I don't think that's the case. I think he's there. It would be great, but he's maybe there in some cases a decoy on long plays. And if he happens to slip through, great. But the value might be in what we saw in the preseason game. The short situation where that burst and acceleration is enough to open a window. That might not be what fans expect from Marvin Mims, but however it gets the job done, it gets the job done.
Well, and I would just warn fans too, especially fantasy league owners that DM me. I would be very cautious taking him, because he's not going to get the number of targets you're thinking. As Shawn and I are talking about, he's a guy that's going to have some games where it's 3 catches, 75 yards, and he's going to have some catches where he has 1 catch for 4 yards. He's not right now, as we sit here today, he's not going to receive the most targets. It's going to be Cortland Sutton.
Mm-hmm.
Sutton's going to get 8 targets a game. If I'm what my eyes are telling me right now, he's going to be the guy. But if they're going to win, and I wrote this a couple weeks ago, and I think they'll be a little more explosive maybe than I'm giving credit for, but they need to be boring. And by boring, I mean efficient. And by efficient, it means they've got to run the ball. Run the ball, keep Bo Nix to around 25 passes a game, and then you have a chance. Because if you ask him to throw 35 times a game, you are guaranteed you're going to lose. It's just, you're not going to win with a young quarterback throwing 35, even with most NFL quarterbacks, frankly, if you look at the numbers. But a good game for me, I'm thinking 18 for 26, 180 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. He rushes for 40 or rushes for 30, and then you run for 130 a game.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they can win. I mean, everyone says, what do you think their record is? Well, again, I like the over 5.5. I'm thinking it might be 6.
Yeah.
But they have a chance to surprise. And if they're going to do it, it has to start up front in that schedule where you could go 4-4. You could make some head, because if you look at the back half of that schedule, Ravens, Chiefs, Chargers, it's just, that's not the place to make up ground.
What we saw, I think, in the first preseason game was promising in that regard. I watched a little bit of the Colts broadcast as well of that, and they were repeatedly surprised when the Broncos came out in the eye, not once but a few times. Kind of saying, "Wow, a bit of a throwback formation." But I think at a certain point with football, it's so cyclical, right? And things don't ever entirely go away. It may be for the Broncos that's all right. They have a stable of running backs who all have different skill sets, but you have a group of guys that can do it. It's fine to be a power run game and a team that works basically power run and then play action. There's nothing wrong with that. And then when you think about the quarterbacks that they will face in the AFC, the best way to beat them is to keep them off the field. That this is kind of an old school approach. Win the time of possession battle, and you'll be able to keep yourself in the games. Much like think of when college basketball, someone's playing one of the top teams and they just try to muck it up and they take every second of the shot clock. You're just keeping it close and maybe hoping that you can steal something, or the change of pace and tempo that the other team wants to play. When they can't, they may be frustrated and press and make mistakes.
The key will be, can Sean Payton resist the temptation to put the ball in the air.
Right.
Because last year they were running the ball really well early, and he just wasn't running the ball. Their yards per carry early in the season was among the top 5 in the league, and their attempts were in the bottom 5. And it was like, this isn't lining up. The one thing you're doing well, you're not doing enough, because he loves to pass the football. He loves it. And that's where it's that gravitational pull. Is he going to get, Bo can do this. We feed him a little more, and suddenly you look up and it's, you're 28 for 42. And again, I don't think you can win that way. And honestly, if it's just about the development of Nyx and he ends up with more reps from it and you win 6 games, but the arrow's pointing up, it's still a successful season for me.
Yeah.
I mean, the season is viewed through the prism of Bo Nix. If you walk away from this season and the arrow's pointing up on him, all the other pieces begin to fit together. If you walk away going, I don't know if he's, a starter, he's the guy, then everything is thrown into chaos.
Well, and you're going to have a top 10, maybe even a top 5 pick with a whole bunch of options coming out of college for quarterback. And you don't want to do that, of course, but we watched the Arizona Cardinals do that a few years ago when they picked Josh Rosen. And one year they realized that's not the answer. And he was picked 10th, I believe, so pretty close to where Nyx was. And instead of deciding to throw good money after bad, they're like, I think we saw what we saw. We're just going to go in for Kyler Murray.
I don't think they would do that, though, because Shawn has so much invested in making Bo Nix work. Because who would you? I mean, if you're going to move up for Shador, a Carson Beck, Quinn Ayers. I don't think none of those 3. That's not Caleb Williams. That's
right. I agree with that.
Generational quarterback. And again, he has so much at stake for Bo Nix in terms of his legacy, Sean Payton's legacy in Denver. So much of his stake on Bo Nix succeeding that I think no matter how this season goes, barring weird injury, he's all in.
Well, that would be my last question for you then, because this is a discussion I've had over the course of the last couple months, and especially talked about it with Broncos fans as well. The idea of success for the season, and I agree with you. The Broncos can, and I believe will, win fewer games than they did last year. But we understand about the dead cap money that's involved over this year and next year. To my mind, the Broncos, by deed, if not by word, understand they're in a rebuild, and the target to actually make noise in the AFC playoffs is 2026. If it happens to come sooner than that, that's great. But this is about assembling a roster now in camp. 2/3 of that, Sean Payton's guys that have been brought in since he came in. Obviously, you're worried about the development of Nyx. But I look at this and think the same thing. If they win 5 games, 6 games, fans may look at it and say, wow, they're going backwards. You can have a worse win-loss record and still be pointed in the right direction in which you weren't at the end of last year. And I think that's what we're going to see at the Broncos, because everything I've seen at camp is a team that at least knows, 1, what they are right now, and 2, where they want to go, and they have a plan of how to get there. I don't think we can say that for Broncos teams, quite frankly, between about 2017 and 2022.
Well, what's fascinating about that, because I agree with some of your points, Sean Payton will not use the word rebuild.
Of course not.
He's never won fewer than 7 games. And he thinks he can top that total, or certainly reach that total. So while you said 2026 be a playoff contender, I would disagree that they believe they will be a contender next season. They won't say any of this publicly, but if they go 6-11 or 7-10, then the cap clears up. You're $32 million on Wilson. A lot of that will be absorbed by just the increase in the salary cap. You can go out and get an offensive weapon or 2. I believe they see themselves a young, hungry team, like a college class of recruits in their sophomore and junior year, ready to compete for a playoff berth fully in 2025. Because if they go first 3 years of Payton without a playoff berth, he will enter year 4 on the hot seat. That's when part of the sacrifice of eating the money on Wilson, which ownership did, I believe in talking to sources on that's fine. But when we get to year 4, going into year 4, the arrow's got to be up. It can't be, we've had 3 straight losing seasons and who knows what's going to happen this year. So that's the only place I would disagree with you, Shawn, is the fact I believe next year in 2025, they will enter that season saying it's playoffs or bust.
So much the better. And they have the one thing already that teams want when they're trying to get that direction, and that is a QB1 on a rookie contract. That's a big deal. He is Troy Renck, of course, with the Denver Post. Check out the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. The new one with Devon Vele just dropped literally about 30 minutes ago. So go get it while it's hot. And obviously, you have a lot to tackle with this joint practice as training camp ends. Appreciate the time, my friend.
Absolutely, Shawn. Look forward to being on with you all season.
Looking forward to it. We will be back with more from the Broncos joint practice. And it's senior day. It's the end. Training camp will be over at the end of today at Broncos Park at Dove Valley. We'll be back with more at Mile High Sports next. Welcome back to training camp at Broncos Park out at Dove Valley. We'll keep it going with the coverage we have today. We have a terrific number of guests for you and all really good football minds. That's why we bring them on. And Myck Miller joining us from Fox 31, also the host of Colorado Sports Night. That's right. You know what? I feel like, Myck, if you had like a baseball card collection, right? And you always wanted to get like the whole team when you were a kid, right? Yeah. You're always missing like the one person. We're not. We're going to wrap up the whole Colorado Sports Night team today. We'll get everybody. We'll have you, and we'll have Arran Andersen, and we already got Bruce earlier this week.
There
we
you
got
go.
Taylor yesterday, so we got the whole crew. So check them out every weeknight on Colorado Sports Night, and of course everything that Myck's doing at Fox 31. But here we are on the final day of training camp. Of course, the Broncos still have 2 preseason games left. The Packers and Broncos are out here today. They will play on Sunday night. Matt LaFleur, their head coach, has said the starters for the Packers not likely to play in this game, making this a really valuable joint practice for both teams. But the idea is these joint practices come along, and now especially with LaFleur saying the starters aren't going to play for the most part, these are becoming more valuable to many coaches than the preseason games themselves, because obviously you can practice exactly what you want instead of hoping that the situation just happens organically during the game.
I mean, there's a divide between NFL coaches, it feels like. There's the old generation that Sean Payton embodies, and there's the young generation that Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, those guys kind of embody, where they don't want to play their starters in these preseason games, whereas head coach Sean Payton has made it very clear that these are valuable reps for the starters to get going into the regular season. So I like the Sean Payton mold of it, because I do think he uses the analogy that you have to build up calluses. And the Broncos can't afford to get off to a slow start like they did last year. So whoever is going to be the starting quarterback, whoever is going to be the starting center, the starting corner, aside from Patrick Surtain, they're going to need valuable game reps so that in week 1 in Seattle, it's not their first time seeing these game reps in these game situations. So, yeah, I think Sean Payton's done a really good job of running this camp, these joint practices. We debated it last night on Colorado Sports Night. If you were a fan, would you rather go to a joint practice or a preseason game? I said joint practice first and foremost because it's free.
And it's close.
It's close.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about the beer and all those kind of sales. And also, you're getting real life situations. And like you said, the Green Bay Packers will not roll out Jordan Love and those starters most likely this Sunday. So these joint practices are so valuable. And so far, there haven't been any fights or anything that have derailed the competition out there, which is always a good thing.
The league put the kibosh on that pretty harsh with the big fine levied earlier in camp with the Giants practice where there was a scuffle. And the league made it very clear that those fines are going to be significant, and they may scale up for teams that are having that. So you had a lot of coaches talk about how they were going to make sure that you watched all this and you didn't get into the scuffles. You don't want anyone to get hurt. That's the one thing both teams absolutely do not want. But it's a good sign for the Broncos. You talk about some of these starting jobs that are up for grabs. One of the best signs for this team is, quite frankly, there aren't that many. Yep. And we know who QB1 is. He hasn't been announced, but it's going to be Bo Nix. I mean, that's very clear, and it quite frankly always was. But now you look at it and you think, okay, center's of one of those positions. For the starter you're looking for. That's the only one on the offense you're really looking for as a starter. On defense, you're looking at maybe who's alongside Alex Singleton. Maybe it's Cody Barton, maybe it's Jonas Griffith. But that player is not on the field a lot because nickel is everyone's base. So you're really talking about who's opposite of Pat Surtain. Yeah. And that's about it for starters. I mean, this team actually does know who its starters are. That's a good thing. Obviously, you always want to improve the roster, but it is nice when you get into this point, unlike last year where Sean Payton was trying to get a feel for so many guys, try to figure out where they all fit. You know who, let's say, I'm going to be very nice to long snappers because I've been hard on long snappers before. You have 25 NFL starters, right? Yeah. And I'll even say it's 26 because I count the nickel back as a starter. But you know who 23 of them are on this team. And that's good because now you can start building with those starters and have them out there and hopefully hit the ground in Seattle in a couple weeks running.
Yeah, I think it's good because also there just seems to be a sense of competition. Even though we know who the starters are going to be, Sean Payton has put a culture in this team that nothing is going to be given. Everything is going to be earned. There's going to be competition. And just because you're the starter week 1 in Seattle doesn't mean you're going to be the starter at the end of the season against the Kansas City Chiefs. And so that's what I like about how Sean Payton is running this program. Obviously, if you're looking at key positions, like no one's ever going to dethrone Patrick Surtain as the starting safety. No one's going to dethrone Cortland Sutton as the starting wide receiver. But there is this hope that if you're the third, fourth guy in a room, if you compete, if you show the coaching staff that you're willing to get better, to learn, that you will have a chance at some point to get out there and show what you want to do. And I think that's how, I don't know how other camps have gone. And so far, I've only covered a Nathaniel Hackett and a Sean Payton-led camp. It's diametrically opposed as to how those camps were really run. Different. But if you talk to anybody around the National Football League, Sean Payton runs a camp old school. Now the CBA limits how many padded practices and how much time you can be out on the practice field. But the vibe of a Sean Payton-led training camp is you are going to be aggressive. You are going to fight. There's going to be competition. And I think that's what the Denver Broncos desperately need. You're not going to have a Patrick Mahomes. As you saw, only Patrick Surtain was voted in the top 100, voted on by the players. Right. And so you don't have that upper echelon talent. But he talks about getting the right 53 right. And if you have the right 53 in this system under Sean Payton, I feel like this team can do a lot of damage. And he's talked about it. A young team is a dangerous team because they don't know any better. They don't know what they should be doing. They're just going out there and competing every day.
There is almost a desire to make a college approach of the us against the world mentality for the Broncos a little bit in this camp. And the point you bring up about the competition is important because that's where I go back to the quarterback, quote unquote competition. There never was one. This was about basically waiting to see when Bo Nix was ready. And given the body of work, the likelihood of him being the week 1 starter is something I've talked about since before he was drafted. But the idea of nothing's given, instead of anointing your starter. Now, granted, I get it. It's not Caleb Williams. The situation is different. But they kind of went with this idea like, well, it's still a competition. Look, in the room and in the coaching meetings, they knew Bo Nix will eventually earn this job. But we're not just going to hand it to him. We're going to make sure to give the other guys a third of the reps, sometimes more of it, and make sure that Nix earns it. And I think that gives him more opportunity to lead as a Denver Bronco faster rather than just being the guy who walks in out of nowhere, says, this is our QB1. He's the leader of our team. Making Nix earn it, at least in a small amount of it, I think has an impact that not only pays off immediately, but even down the road. It gives them a jump start towards respect in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, what's the saying? Pressure makes diamonds. And if Jarrett Stidham came into camp and he knew he had no shot of being the starting quarterback, I don't know him personally, but generally it's common, knowledge and common nature of just being like, oh, I'm not going to be the starter. I'll just kind of coast. Whereas Jarrett Stidham's like, I have a legitimate chance. Zach Wilson, I have a legitimate chance of being the starting quarterback.
You don't know
I'm going to push.
Good, right?
Yeah, you don't know. At anything, you could have a situation like J.J. McCarthy where you get hurt in camp. Anything can happen in the National Football League. So I do like that Sean Payton said, I don't care if you're the 12th overall pick. I don't care if we invested our first pick in you. You're going to come out here and you are going to earn every bit of it. And you see it in these competitions, whether it's 7-on-7, whether it's the drill where they try to throw into the small target. They are all pushing each other to try to be the best, and that's going to get the best out of Bo Nix, is having that competition. Now, eventually, he will be named the starter, and it will be very clear that he is the guy for the rest of the year, because I don't think you can name Bo Nix the starter and then pull him in the regular season.
Well, there's no point, right? Let's be honest about the Broncos' outlook this year. They're not a Super Bowl contender. They're not even really a playoff contender. The over-under on wins in Las Vegas is 5.5.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea, especially because as we had Troy Renck on a little earlier, he talked about the season being viewed through the prism of Bo Nix's development, which I think is right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're going to name him, what is the point? I mean, you have to decide if you're going to have a top 5 pick, if this doesn't work out, you have to decide if he's the guy or not, or if you want to go in another direction. So to a certain extent, there's no point in pulling him, but there's always the risk, because there's 52 other guys on this roster who their careers also are reflected in the manner in which their team performs. And you have to balance that as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a scenario where Cortland Sutton talked about he has 9 quarterbacks in his tenure in Denver.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, he and the organization had a back and forth as it pertains to his contract this offseason. If you want to build a culture, if you want to build a team, because let's be honest, you build through the draft and you also build through free agency. You're going to have to build a program here that free agents are going to be like, I want to play for the Denver Broncos because they have Sean Payton. But you're also going to be like, I want to play for the Denver Broncos because this young Bo Nix, I think that he's going to develop into one of the elite quarterbacks in the National Football League. And so you want to build confidence for Bo Nix. You want to build confidence in this building. And let's be honest, it's Sean Payton as the head coach. It's not some first-year head coach. Right. He's been here before. And if you look at the schedule, and I was looking at the schedule just the other day, aside from Andy Reid, on their schedule, name a head coach that's better than Sean Payton. You look at Mike Tomlin.
I'll give you Mike Tomlin. I would argue Mike Tomlin is.
And then you can look at John Harbaugh.
Okay.
But either of those coaches, you could be like, maybe you could have a debate. I think Andy Reid, especially with the quarterback of Patrick Mahomes, it's no debate.
Not anymore.
But it's a scenario where Sean Payton is going to get the better of coaches. Like Raheem Morris when the Falcons come to town. I like Raheem Morris.
I do too.
Is there a scenario where you think that Sean Payton could come up with a scheme that would outdo Morris and they get a win? So I think there's a lot of energy. I think there's a lot of positive things that the Denver Bronco fans can look at. And I know 5.5 is the over-under. I mean, I would hammer the over just because I feel like Sean Payton finally has his guy at quarterback. And I feel like he has his guys. How many times has he talked about how he likes big wide receivers?
Right.
Like he is building the team the way he wants it. And if they are able to execute, and it feels like this team is buying into everything that Sean is selling them, I think it's a team that's dangerous, and I think it's a team that's going to upset a lot of people because they just look at, oh, well, they don't have the upper echelon talent. Well, upper echelon talent doesn't always win. Remember that super team that the Eagles tried to build years ago? Like you can have all the talent in the world, but if the players aren't buying into what the head coach is selling, you're not going to win games. And I think Denver is going to win some big games this year because of what we've seen in training camp with the players buying into what head coach Sean Payton is selling.
It is kind of fascinating because the point you're bringing up, I think, is important because it does seem, I think it's fair to say this is a team that has bought in. I think you're right. Camp practices have been uniformly, they've been professional, they've been smooth, they've been focused. There hasn't been a lot of scenarios. Obviously, at times coaches are hollering at players a little bit when they mess up or do something wrong or they're trying to teach something. But for the most part, there hasn't been as much of that as you'd think because everybody seems to be on the same page. And that is a credit to Payton and his staff's preparation in the film room, in the meetings. So when these guys get out here, they know what they're supposed to do during their limited time on the practice field.
Yeah, and how many times does Coach Payton talk about it in his press conference after practice? When people ask for a quick evaluation, he always says, I got to go watch the film.
Right.
And that's not, I don't take that as coach talk, even though it's a coach comment. I take it as this man is so detail oriented. that he literally is going to spend hours watching the film and dissecting every part of practice, that he can't have you give you a quick evaluation after practice because so much of it goes into the film study of practice. And I think another thing, I don't mean to bring up, old wounds, but Russell Wilson is not at camp here. And I think that is key because I think last year's camp, he didn't have the full offseason because he got hired a little bit later. And then it was so quickly trying to build a team around a quarterback who was not going to be his guy. Now that he got Russ out of here and he's got Justin Simmons out of here and kind of got the old guard that really went through the period of just losing Jerry Jeudy, it just feels more loose. While the practices seem very, very intense, it feels like the players are a lot more loose because there's a clear vision and everybody's bought into the vision. And let's be honest, NFL Network, ESPN, Fox, they aren't all attacking the Denver Broncos right now because they don't really expect anything from the Denver Broncos. And Coach Payton, I think he is, like you said, using that college formula of no one is talking about us. Nobody expects anything of us. All we have to go out and do is go play our game. And when we upset everybody, it's going to be glorious for everybody involved.
Yeah, it is a lighter camp, and that's a good point. I think it is because there's especially so much with Wilson here last year, and it's not really trying to pile on Wilson. It's just that Payton and Wilson, stylistically, personality-wise, the manner in which they approach football could not have been more different, and it just wasn't a fit. And it would not shock me at all if Wilson was pretty good with the Steelers this year, with Tomlin, who's been very good at adjusting what he does to fit the players he has. Payton is a little more college coach style in that regard too. I do what I do, and I need players that fit it. Mm-hmm. And that's more of a college type approach again. So it feels lighter. It feels like this team is more jubilant to play. They look like they have more energy. They look like they're ready to go out and surprise some people because there isn't that weird gravitational pull of your superstar quarterback and a head coach that clearly doesn't see eye to eye. And that stuff casts a pall over an entire organization. That's gone. And in fact, it's not only dissipated because of the departure of Wilson, but it dissipated entirely because now it's the opposite.
Yeah.
The coach has his handpicked quarterback who plays the exact style that the coach wants. And so everyone's immediately on the same page. And quite frankly, even though there's a lot of coaching required for Bo Nix, the kind of trying to get Russell Wilson to overwrite his programming, to do something different, that doesn't need to happen here. And so they can spend more time focusing on other parts of the roster too.
Yeah. And I think also it's just so much of what's going to go into this season is exactly a mirror of what happened last season. Like, you can't afford to get off to a slow start. And I think Sean Payton's one of those coaches that he learns from his mistakes. And I don't expect the Denver Broncos to get off to a slow start this year. There seems to be a lot more urgency with this team as opposed to last year, because I think so much of last year was teaching, organizing, like you said, making adaptations to different parts of the scheme. Like, there's a sense of urgency that right out of the gate, they are going to come out aggressive. I mean, look at the game against Indy. How many times in your career can you say, I was locked in for all 60 minutes of a preseason game? That doesn't happen very often, but that's what happened in the first preseason game, because there was a sense of urgency that even though this game doesn't count, quote unquote, as it pertains to getting to the playoffs and regular season win totals, it was, we are going to come out of the gate immediately and have a sense of urgency. That first drive by Jarrett Stidham, while it was derailed by penalties, you could tell they were being aggressive. They were pushing the ball down the field. And some of the drills that we've seen in this joint practice against the Packers, the Broncos have had a clear purpose, and they've got one thing that they want to get done, and they are getting it done in this practice. And I think that's going to carry over into preseason game 2 when Arizona comes to the Mile High City next week. And then when we get to the Seattle in week 1 of the regular season.
Training camp ends today. It'll be upon us before we know it. He is Myck Miller. Make sure you check him out at Fox 31 and, of course, Colorado Sports Night, weeknights on Channel 2. Appreciate the time. I know you have a bunch to cover today on this last day, but we appreciate you carving a little bit of time out to sit with
appreciate
us.
You guys having me on. It's been a good camp, and like they say at the end of camp, I'm glad it's over.
Yeah. And not over for the Broncos. Just we're not here anymore, but they still have to be here. But it will do it for us. Myck Miller from Fox 31, thanks so much. We'll be back with more from Broncos camp out at Dove Valley with Mile High Sports next. Welcome back to Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit at Dove Valley. You know where it is. The name's changed, but it's still the same place.
Did Troy Renck spit in my coffee?
No.
Okay.
No. I wasn't entirely watching it, but no.
Oh, great.
I feel very confident.
Great.
Mick,
Did Myck roofie it?
You'll find that out later. But when we're talking about the Broncos here at Detroit practice, final day of training camp with the Packers here. The Packers will play on Sunday, and they will have an opportunity, of course, to face off against them in the preseason game. But starters won't be out there. They are out here today.
Yes.
So you get a better look at some of this. And I guess now, Nate, that we have a pretty good idea, and I'm fine with just calling it. Bo Nix is going to be QB1. Bo Nix is going to start week 1 in Seattle.
Yes, he is.
Now that you know who your starter is,
Yes.
and we know that stylistically he fits with Sean Payton.
Yes.
How fast can he accelerate the Broncos' rebuilding timeline?
18 months. I'm just
wow.
No,
I was like, okay, go on.
No,
that's a hard line.
Here's why. Because I believe the conversation we need to be having is about what this team looks like next October. Not what it looks like this October.
We talked to Troy Renck just a little bit ago, and you and I have said that maybe 2026 is the target. Troy said he expects.
He thinks. Yeah, I heard
2025.
I heard him saying that.
But what we're not hearing is this year. This year is about a growth year, a rebuilding year, identifying the talent.
I know that he thinks they're going to get 6 wins. You and I have both said we think they're going to do 5.
That's tomato,
right.
really.
We think the only reason that 5 or 6 matters is if you're a better. That's the only reason it matters. The point is that we both believe you are looking at a half a dozen or less games. And Troy is in agreement with that. So are a lot of our friends here in the media along the row on the other side of the camera. That are watching this joint practice right now, which, by the way, I got a little tidbit for you on Jordan Love. But if that's what we're looking at from a win total, then you're looking at another top 5 pick, maybe top 6.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing, people.
No, not when you're not a Super Bowl contender right now.
Exactly. No. And frankly, when you are, you're not this isn't a wild card team either, unless Patrick Mahomes goes down in week 1. And even then, frankly, I got a lot of trust in Andy Reid to figure out how to win games.
I do too. Well, I mean,
it's like Belichick with Castle.
The last time he did miss a game, your Oregon State friend Matt Moore came in.
Oh yeah,
and beat the Broncos anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, it doesn't make
precisely.
You can't make that assumption.
So I think that there's I think there's a value in being willing to accept where you are going to be drafting again next April.
And they actually have all the picks this time.
Correct.
Going forward.
They have
all the trades
for
Wilson and Peyton are done.
They have all of those picks, which is a good thing. You have the opportunity when you have been salary cap strapped this season, and when you have a guy in Pat Surtain that you want to pay, you don't want him to go anywhere. I think they've made that very clear.
Yeah.
They don't want him to go anywhere. And so you have the ability with that top 6, top 7 pick of next year to come in again the same way that you just brought up a minute ago when it comes to a rookie salary at quarterback. You might have the ability to have another key position, whether that's left tackle.
Yeah, it was like cough, left tackle.
Whether that's left
exactly
tackle.
Where I'm thinking too.
Whether that is a breakout corner that you can put opposite Pat Surtain so that when you're paying Surtain,
They can't just avoid him, right?
You can't avoid, but you're paying Surtain, and then you've got another solid young corner that is on a rookie deal,
right?
That you then have a 5th-year option, and you don't have to stress until, and this blows my mind because it makes me feel really old, 2030.
Right.
That's nuts.
Getting the cap right is a big part of this equation, and
there's going to be more cap money coming in. There's going to be the cap's going to keep growing,
keeps going up, obviously, and if for Nix, at least on his rookie deal, it's tremendously advantageous for the Broncos, and you'd like to start making noise sooner rather than later because you can talk recently, at least in the last 10 plus years of football, quarterbacks on rookie deals end up on teams that win Super Bowls. Now, they'd be good quarterbacks. You have to be Russell Wilson. You have to be Patrick Mahomes. But those are the situations, or Brock Purdy, they haven't gotten there, but they're at that precipice. You'll find out a lot of these teams that are in that mix have quarterbacks on rookie deals because then they can afford to pay the rest of the roster. And when you talked about the tidbit on Jordan Love, that'll be one of the challenges of the Packers.
Yes.
Not this year when the cap hit jumps to $20 million, but he starts going up and up there with the new deal.
Absolutely, he does. And so let me share this with you because I actually brought this up on the Fade 5 podcast this morning with Brad. So it's a betting tidbit that I have for you.
Okay.
Over at DraftKings right now, and we talked a little bit about things like passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards on yesterday's show. Some of where the money is right now with those kind of bets on BetMGM. But one of the things that you can do right now is you can bet on who will lead the league in passing touchdowns. Brad is all about Patrick Mahomes. The reason he's all about Patrick Mahomes is because Brad believes that number should be right around plus 350, plus 400. The number is actually plus 650.
Oh.
That's pretty damn good value.
For the best quarterback on the planet?
For him to lead the league in passing touchdowns. I told Brad I didn't disagree with the idea on Mahomes in part because I think there's value there because I'm in agreement with him. I think that number should probably be about 60% of what it is. Here's why I throw out the tidbit of Jordan Love. He is 16-1.
Woof.
And you know why I like that? He was number 2 in passing touchdowns last year.
And he did not get really – he didn't look like the Jordan Love we saw at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year.
So he was second only to Dak Prescott last year. Dak had 36. Jordan Love had 32.
You would have won a bar bet right there if you would have tried to tell people who led the league in touchdown passes last year. And they would have said Dak Prescott. I think people would have been surprised at that.
So,
too. And that's not going to happen this year.
Throw that
CD Lamb.
I do that as a quick tidbit, because he's right in front of us right now, and they're running some of their offensive drills with the Packers offense going up against the Broncos defense right now on the field in front of us. But I throw that out there because I think that's tremendous value at 16-1. I'm not telling you to throw a whole unit bet on it, but I think it's worth a quarter unit at those kinds of payouts. So it could be somebody, if you are someone that likes doing season-long bets, my son loves doing that, right? Leading rushers, who's going to win the NFC, things like that. I don't, because I don't like tying up my money like that. But I think there's some value there when we talk about the performance of this team. I will also tell you that there were a couple of plays that happened. At one point, we had the Broncos offense and the Packers defense going on in front of us. And there were a couple of play action plays that were run. And I'm not a coach. I'm also not looking at this with the equivalent of an all 22 film.
Right.
But I can tell you that Bo Nix ran a really nice play action rollout. And I watched Jordan Love do basically the same thing. And I'm telling you right now, both of them looked the same. So Broncos fans, if you could get him some reps and you can get him in the right place and you can give him the full speed opportunities, especially on the road with these road games, would you take a quarterback that can start to do some of the things that Jordan Love can? Would you take a quarterback that would do what Troy Renck just talked about, which is, can I get a guy that's going to have 3,000, 3,200 yards on the season through the air,
right?
But is maybe going to get me 30 to 40 every game on the ground? I'd take that.
And I think there's a risk in that, of course, obviously, when you're talking about quarterbacks getting hit. But Bo Nix ran earlier in his career in college and was pretty effective. And
he did that at Auburn. Yeah.
And we saw him do it in the first preseason game. And judicious running. In fact, I likened the longer run that he had in the preseason game a little bit to the way Patrick Mahomes sometimes runs, and the fact that he exhausted his reads and then realized there's a window here. I'm going to take what I can take.
And there was a design run.
There was a design run.
There was a design run.
There were a couple RPOs, and one turned out to be a pass touchdown to Mims because he read it right and didn't run.
But there was a designed run, a little bit of an RPO, but I think it was actually a designed run from the very beginning that he picked up that first down. He knew where the marker was. He got it, and a couple of yards on top of that. So, he has the ability to do that. I truly believe that the history, like, you're going to think I'm crazy, folks. I believe the history of RG3, I think RG3's biggest contribution to the National Football League is that quarterbacks that like to be able to scramble now know what to do because they watched him absolutely get his ass kicked.
Right. Right. There's a lot of that.
I'm convinced that it was one of those where, like, coaches could put his film up and go, yeah, don't do that.
Tough for RG3 too, by the way, on his social media after ESPN made some cuts. Grabbed the great clip from Friday. How are you going to get fired on your day off?
How you get fired on your day off? But his post was very gracious.
Yeah. It is not the end for RG3. I think is one of the more interesting new personalities on that scene. And he's great in college coverage too. I like him a lot. He'll land on his feet.
I think so too. So anyway, going back to what we were talking about with Bo, and the ability to have that quarterback and to be able to know your starter and to do those kinds of things. I keep coming back, and I know I'm a broken record, and I'm sorry for those of you that have been watching the show every day. We appreciate you, but I'm sorry that I'm a broken record. Folks, it's okay if this team only wins 6 games.
It is.
It is okay. I know that it's going to be annoying, but I think they're going to be more fun to watch. I think you're going to see Bo Nix screw up. And then I think you're also going to see him make some plays like he did on that scramble that he caught Cortland Sutton on the sideline in the first game. I think you're going to see
he had a play like that earlier today, as a matter of fact, too, where he extended the play and then found the receiver on the sideline.
He had a beautiful play action.
Couldn't make out the receiver from my vantage point. There were some bodies in front of there, but saw that as well. So there's some inventiveness.
He had some good play action stuff, some inventive stuff. We saw him get Troy Franklin involved in a play right in front of us early on in practice, and Troy has not had the best camp so far, but that's okay.
But hit him on a slant route that might have gone for 6.
Sure would have.
So there's a lot of promise there. And I don't know where Bo Nix's ceiling is. I can tell you, I don't believe it's Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Burrow or those kind of guys.
But he doesn't have to be.
But can he be Jordan Love? Hey, Jordan Love's new deal pays him $55 million a year on average.
I've already told you. I believe the Packers will be in the NFC Championship game. So I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the Packers will be in the NFC Championship game.
Look again at the Niners. Is Brock Purdy an elite quarterback? I mean, he puts up some good numbers, but I mean, no one compares him with those kind of guys. So, you will have. I think it's a very low bar. I get it, but the best quarterback the Broncos have had since Peyton Manning retired, and I think you'll see it in the early going. I think you'll see it right off the bat, and I think there is a lot of reason for promise. And as Troy Renck, who joined us earlier, said specifically, Sean Payton, remember, he started one rookie quarterback ever, Ian Book, back in 2021 for one game. Yep. And he didn't want to do that. That was injury required, but he has selected Bo Nix. This is his hand-picked quarterback. This is his guy. And in his second stint as an NFL coach, his legacy to a certain extent is going to be tied up in Bo Nix. And so that the Broncos are fully invested in making this work. And it's a matter of just getting them the time and getting them the reps and being patient. And you're right, Nate. I think you can have a worse year. I think the team can still look better. And I think you can still have a more entertaining year, which I absolutely think we're going to get out of the Denver Broncos, even if it doesn't end with a lot of wins. So that's a big part of it as well. I talked a little bit with Myck Miller about the fact that if it was baseball cards, we managed to collect the whole Colorado Sports Night team with Bruce Hurdle and Taylor Kilgore and Myck Miller joining us. Arran Andersen will step in and talk a little bit about this training camp and what he's seeing from Fox 31. We'll do that next on Mile High Sports. Welcome back to Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. It took the last day of training camp, Arn, but I finally figured that one out. 6 signs in front of me. You think it might not have taken me so long, but there you go. We're out at Dove Valley for the final day of Broncos training camp, a joint practice between the Green Bay Packers and the Denver Broncos prior to the preseason game on Sunday. Yeah. Arran Andersen of Fox 31 joins us, also the host of Colorado Sports Night on KWGN Channel 2. Keep that in mind, of course, because we've already had Bruce Hurdle. We have already had Taylor Kilgore. Okay. And we're planning on finishing the whole crew here. So Colorado Sports Night, one of our favorites here. So, we want to pick the brains of the smart folks over there, and Arran Andersen here today. We were talking a little bit before you came on, and this is going to be the joint practices are always exciting. The NFL has definitely made a focus on making sure that people aren't fighting. Big fines levied already, warnings that bigger fines would be levied, to the point where Matt LaFleur is going to hold his, make sure the interactions between the top offense, the defensive backs and the wide receivers in one-on-ones aren't going to go against each other, kind of hoping that might tamp things down. We'll see. I think competition is competition, and both teams are tired of hitting their teammates. So of course, we've been to these before, and we know how it goes. At the same time, the Broncos really do, and this is a good problem to have. Seems like a bad problem. The Broncos have been down for so long, it feels like a bad problem. It's a good problem, but they have a real roster crunch on the offensive side of the ball.
They do, and particularly at wide receiver, because I've got my flashcards here, Shawn.
Smart.
Just so I can kind of keep things in line. But if you go down the list, Cortland Sutton certainly has a spot. Yep. Josh Reynolds is the strong number 2.
Him as a free agent,
Marvin Mims, Pro Bowler, can not only catch footballs, but he's going to be your return guy. So he's obviously there. Devon Vele, I think, has been one of the stars of training camp. Yep. 7th-round pick who's certainly established himself as a weapon, a guy who can make plays if the ball's thrown his way. Troy Franklin, to me, is kind of the outlier. I mean, the Broncos traded up to pick him in the 4th round. You feel like with that sort of an investment, with the potential he has, the speed he has, that you certainly would like to see if you can develop him. I don't think he's a guy that gets through waivers. You're not going to pass him to the practice squad. So you've got to keep him around, which for me creates a problem between Tim Patrick and Little Jordan Humphrey, which I believe they both count the same in terms of what their hit would be against the salary cap. Yeah, Patrick certainly coming off the injuries would be a great story if he could hook on and make this team after missing the last 2 years. But, Humphrey's a guy who played really, really well last year when given the opportunity.
And played for Sean Payton in his last year in New Orleans as well.
Absolutely. So he's a Payton guy. So as you alluded, it's a good problem to have, but it is going to be curious to see exactly how those numbers stack up because as we know, if you keep 3 quarterbacks, you're going to have to take one less guy in the receiver group, maybe one less tight end, maybe one less running back on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Brandon Johnson was the Broncos' second leading touchdown getter in terms of receptions last year.
Yeah.
He might be on the outside looking in, or at least trying to sneak him on the practice squad. And that's pretty remarkable, especially last year when the Broncos were just looking for players who could contribute at all.
Yeah.
And Johnson steps up and gets the second most touchdowns on the team, and he might not even make this team. So that's a good thing, but it also can be a difficult set of decision-making because Sean Payton's talked about that, and we'll get to the quarterbacks. The first thing he mentioned prior to this training camp in the evaluation process with players is his worry, his fear that a lot of coaches have. The one thing he said you don't want to see is someone you cut succeeding on someone else's roster.
Of course.
And that's, I think, what drives a lot of these decisions, and especially the receiver core, where there is a lot of talent, right? We're doing the on paper or what we've seen on the practice field against only the other Broncos, though.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that you're guessing that you're picking the right guys that will produce at the NFL level. And maybe that gives a Brandon Johnson a leg up because he has done it for you.
Yeah.
And those decisions are going to be fascinating. But, potential is one thing, production's another. And the Broncos have a bunch of guys that are long on one and short on the other.
Yeah. And, we didn't talk about experience. I think Patrick and Sutton are your experienced guys. Johnson certainly has been here for a couple years.
Right. And Reynolds, of course, who you signed, has experience, but he's a lock.
Right. It's going to be a fascinating couple of weeks. And certainly we know how important these joint practices can be because, these are situational reps. You're going to get as much out as you can. And you're going to see how these guys function in these kind of scenarios and situations. So this is a day for those guys who are on the bubble to really separate themselves and earn a spot.
Talking about the quarterbacks, it is fascinating. It feels, like the quarterback competition is over. There never really was one. This was all about when Bo Nix was ready, and it turns out, surprise, he's ready now. So the Broncos, obviously starting Nix in this, he'll get the majority of snaps with the ones in this practice. He'll start on Sunday.
Right.
Presumably, some point next week, he'll be named the starter and then either won't play or play a drive in the third one, and then off you go to Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of keeping 3 quarterbacks, that basically needs to happen for the Broncos for a couple reasons. One, you already traded, even though you traded minimal assets to obtain Zach Wilson, it's because he was intriguing enough that Sean Payton had decided I would like to work with him. He's only 6 months older than Bo Nix.
Right.
So maybe you'd like to see what he can do. So can you sneak him onto the practice squad? Probably not. If I'm Minnesota just losing J.J. McCarthy for the year, I'll grab him to sit behind Sam Darnold and just collect ex-Jets, I guess.
Right.
But that makes sense. So you really have to keep all 3 of these guys on the 53 or you're going to lose one of them for nothing.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, even if you're not using all 3, maybe one of them can get you something as a trade down the road over the course of the season. And for a rebuilding Broncos team, they need that too.
Yeah, well, Nick Kosmider from The Athletic wrote a great article last week in which he mentioned last year there were 66 different quarterbacks that started in the NFL. The last time the Broncos had a QB that started every game in the regular season was 2018. That was Case Keenum. You're going to have more than one quarterback start for you this year.
Yeah.
There's the potential for 3. And, oh, by the way, I saw that Ben DiNucci, I don't remember who grabbed him, but he's been scooped up. So he's not going to be on your practice squad. I don't think Wilson sneaks through. There's no way. As you mentioned, there's teams out there in need of quarterbacks, and Minnesota certainly would be one of them.
Yeah, say what you will about Zach Wilson, but he has 33 NFL starts.
Of course.
Those kind of guys do not end up on the free agent market after the first round of cuts.
No.
They'll get scooped up immediately.
No, and in the way that he played in that second half last
10 for
week,
13.
He showed some great presence in the pocket, made great decisions, and Sean Payton, he's kind of the quarterback whisperer. We've seen him resurrect some careers that looked like they were over and headed south, and he's turned some guys around. I think ego-wise, Sean Payton would love to have another feather in his cap to say, aha, remember Zach Wilson, the guy you guys gave up on in New York? I turned him back into a quarterback who's at the very least a guy you could plug and play in the case of an emergency. So I'm of the opinion, and I know you are too, that they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks. They have to.
Yeah, I think so too. This is going to be this training camp, when you look at it on the whole, when you kind of evaluate what it looked like last year in Sean Payton's first year to what it is this year. Chris Thomason of the Denver Gazette pointed out that now 2/3 of the 90 guys that are here are guys that have come in since Sean Payton has come in. So the overhaul, if not entirely complete, is close to it, because obviously you're only keeping 53. And if you got 60 or 61 that are guys he brought in,
right,
you know kind of what you're after for the most part. It also seems that Payton is more comfortable. And that happens when you get your chosen quarterback. But Sean Payton has done something he hasn't ever done before. He's only started a rookie quarterback in 1 game over the course of his career, and he seems almost rejuvenated and excited to be able to have an opportunity to work with a guy in Bo Nix that, while he is not Drew Brees, they share a lot of mindset in the way they approach the offensive side of the game.
Absolutely. And people have talked at great length about Sean Payton's demeanor, his attitude, and in the way we've certainly had a chance to interact with him as members of the media. I agree. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that his guys are here, guys that he trusts, guys that he knows are going to buy into what he's doing. And frankly, last season, if you take a look back, a little bit like herding cats.
And it started with the quarterback.
Absolutely.
The one thing that's dramatically changed, whether Nix is better than this year than Wilson was last year, the difference is the relationship between the quarterback and the coach is much better. And as long as that's kind of where you, in today's NFL especially, that's really where you have to start. Until that's right, you don't really have a lot of room to maneuver as a team.
No, and Jarrett Stidham obviously has 1 year under his belt, has a pretty good grasp of this offense.
But 4 career starts.
True. However, he was here all of last season and certainly has had a chance to become acclimated in this offense. And in lieu of that, you've got a guy who in that quarterback room can certainly help these youngsters try to get up to speed. But I think just peace of mind from a head coach who knows that I've got the guys in place to accomplish what it is I'm trying to do on the football field, I think has a lot to do with the way we've seen him kind of go through a sort of a metamorphosis. Last year he was kind of that cagey, edgy, angry old man. This year he's a lot more relaxed, and I think maybe that's even translated onto the field where the players feel like, okay, if we buy in, this thing is going to function and operate smoothly.
And that's smoothly is the way to put it. I think that's the one thing that I've looked over this whole camp is the idea that it has been professional, it has been smooth, it has been consistent, and there hasn't been a lot of, it's been drama free. And I get that fans for a while look at it and go, but where's the excitement? Where's the juice? Where's all that? And I liken that and look at other teams like, where's all the excitement coming out of Chiefs camp, right? Or the Ravens camp, or look, good teams don't have that, because when you have everything set up the way you want to have it set up, it's businesslike. You get into practice, you do your job, you worry about game day, and you get at it the very next week. The Broncos look like that, and that's maybe, as weird as it sounds, that boring might be the best compliment from year 1 to year 2 under Sean Payton, because now the Broncos look like they're on the same page, and at least they're all pulling on the same end of the rope.
Yeah, no, and that actually starts with Sean Payton. We haven't had a crazy USA Today interview where he's poked the bear, pointed out
all the bears,
the deficiencies,
as many bears as you could find.
The previous coaching staff. He hasn't alluded to his quarterback's weight, which Russell Wilson was trying to keep under
wraps. Or the
wraps.
Commissioner.
Absolutely.
Right.
So as you said, it's been a much quieter couple of weeks here. The Broncos have focused on the task at hand, which is getting a football team in order to play competitive football. And chief among that certainly would be establishing whether or not Bo Nix is your guy. And when you bring in a rookie QB, I think you want to make things as easy as possible, allow him to compete. And I think that thus far we've had a very, very quiet training camp, which is basically probably gone about as on schedule as possible for Sean Payton and his coaching staff.
Yeah, I think so. And the training camp will finish with a bang today. The Packers in town. The Packers will not play much of their starters on Sunday night. So this is really maybe more valuable than the preseason game itself today out at Broncos Park in Dove Valley. Excited to see it. Thanks so much for the time. I know you want to catch some of the practices they get moving here. So appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Shawn. Always great to chat with you. And yeah, look forward to a great practice today. And then we'll see what happens Sunday night under the lights at Mile High.
Well, he is Arran Andersen from Fox 31, and check out every weeknight Colorado Sports Night as well, where he's one of the hosts too. We'll run the gamut, by the way. We're going to grab the whole crew by the time we're done today. We're going to have everybody. So you'll know about Colorado Sports Night. You'll know where to turn every single weeknight. Thanks so much, Arran Andersen.
My pleasure.
We'll be back with more as the Broncos and Packers get it going in their joint practice from Broncos Park on Mile High Sports next. And we are back. Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit at Dove Valley. The end of training camp is on us. The Broncos and Packers wrap up, a bunch of handshaking and guys catching up a little bit as the joint practice, the scrimmages, all those parts are essentially over, and the team's meeting at midfield. Want to remind you that none of this training camp coverage that we've had out here at Broncos training camp happens without our terrific partners. And one of them, by the way, is out here to help you. And that's our friends at Constitute Health. Their goal is to optimize your health the way you want. Everybody is different. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's needs are different. Everything that you're looking for is different. Maybe you want to lose weight. Maybe you want to sleep better. Maybe there's a lot of different things that you want to deal with. And the folks at Constitute can help you with that. Starts with blood work. They work with more than 2,000 blood draw locations all over the country. There's on average one of 15 minutes away from you. And after you get that done and submit it to the friends at Constitute, then their trained medical professionals will go one-on-one with you, providing you with a complete transparency, providing your health, whatever your concerns are, and then work together on your goals. They provide options that will be able to provide you with a lot of different ways to feel the way you want to feel, whether it's just healthier or whether you want to try to maybe turn back the clock a little bit. Hormone replacement, semaglutide, GLP-1 therapies, peptides, NAD+, all of those different therapies are available with Constitute Health, so they can meet the things you want to do, help you burn fat or assist with weight loss, optimize your sleep and sleep cycles, or maybe enhance the cognitive and executive functions as you get later in the day. Maybe you don't have the energy you want to have. You can get help with that as well, and as well as build and retain muscle mass and all sorts of other personal benefits. The point is, it's about you. What do you need? What do you want? And how can they help you get there? That's what Constitute Health does. So check them out at constitutehealth.com and mention Mile High Sports, and you'll get $50 off your initial blood work and your consultation. If you're also visiting Mile High Sports for all that terrific coverage we have on the Broncos from Cody Roark and the Nuggets, their schedule is out now. You can catch all of that from Ryan Blackburn's on top of that. And sooner rather than later, Nate will be happy because the Avalanche will even be back. So when you're visiting milehighsports.com to check all that out, give it a look, and you'll see that Constitute Health link. You can click that, and you can get $50 off that way as well. So go ahead and take control of your health and your life the way you want to with our friends at Constitute Health. Nate, this is wrapping up here, and then I an opportunity here to address some of the comments. We have the viewers that have been commenting all week long, and let's start with the Zach Wilson situation. We know that Bo Nix is QB1. We get that. But Zach Wilson is interesting. One of our commenters correctly pointed out that the new rule where you're allowed to elevate your third quarterback for game day and you don't have to expose them to the practice squad. But you do, you don't have to expose them to waivers every week, but you do have to expose them to waivers to get them onto the practice squad.
Yes.
And that's where things get tricky. Remember, Minnesota already lost J.J. McCarthy for the year. There are teams that are already looking for quarterbacks. If you're the Broncos, and even though Zach Wilson, I understand, is a bit of a reclamation project, he has 33 career starts. You can at least set him in there, and I'm not sure you can slip either Stidham or Wilson through waivers.
No, I don't think that you can, but I think if you're going to try, you do it with Stidham. That's just me.
I agree with you. I think you do it with Stidham, and I think in Stidham's case, remember, by the way, if the Broncos do move on from him, whether it's waivers or they decide to cut him, there's $4 million in savings. There's a $2 million dead cap hit were they to move on, but on the Broncos' pile of dead cap money, that's chump change. So they could move away from it. But Wilson's performance in the first game there, the 10 for 13, obviously it was against a team's backups and really the third string guys that won't be on the roster. But it was a good performance. And I think that Sean Payton, as Troy Renck said earlier, does have a bit of an ego about his reputation as a quarterback whisperer. They brought in Zach Wilson because Sean Payton he saw kind of a lump of clay that he thought he could mold. I don't think they're going to let him go, even though what they traded to get him was minimal. Even though he might be third string on the depth chart, I think letting him go is not really an option, which means you have to keep three.
Yeah, which means you're doing that. But if it's me, I'm willing to roll the dice with Stidham. That's just me, and keep Zach Wilson and how cheap he was for you. So I know I've heard other folks talk about this, including just some of the media, just, you just overhear conversations people are having or whatever. I think a lot of people, I think to a certain extent, I'm in the minority on that. I think a lot of people would rather see see what happens with Stidham and let Wilson be the one that you roll the dice with, to be honest. But at the end of the day, I've said it before, this is all about Bo. I don't care who the backup is. I mean, I really don't. As far as I'm concerned, it could be Troy Renck, because all that matters to me is Bo.
The situation with Wilson, though, is interesting because I think when you really look at it, because of the cost, because of the age, like I mentioned, only 6 months older than Nick's, and no offense to Stidham, but he is clearly a backup quarter. I think Jared Stidham is what he is.
I said it yesterday. I think he's Trevor Siemian.
He's a solid backup quarterback that you can plug in. He's not going to rescue you if he has to come in. That's not the case. And we don't know if Zach Wilson will either. But Zach Wilson still has youth, athleticism, really good arm strength, enough of the raw tools that if you're Sean Payton, you think you can do something with him. I'm with you. I either think Zach Wilson, I don't see a situation where the Broncos cut Zach Wilson. I think Wilson is either on the team and they keep 3, or they've even decided we've seen enough from Wilson to make him the backup because they're looking at it like you do. And they're like, this is about Bo Nix, and either Stidham or Wilson comes in. It doesn't matter. Our season's in trouble. And so we'll stick with the younger, cheaper guy and see if we can coach him up and see what the ceiling is. I think Wilson makes this team either way. I'm with you. I think the guy that actually is maybe in the mix for moving on is probably Stidham, whether it's they try to sneak him on the practice squad or whether they let him go entirely, or whether in the next week or so they try to make a trade, because I think that's a possibility too. And the Broncos, who are rebuilding, can use any picks they can get.
Yes. This is me doing my best to care. I'm sorry. I'm being honest. I'm being honest with y'all. I've done it for over 3 decades of doing on-air work. I'm straight up with you. I'm not going to fake it. I don't care who the hell the backup is. I don't. Do I think there's a little bit of something you might be able to do with Zach Wilson? Sure. I think you are completely underselling, by the way, Sean Payton's ego. But this is, everybody's been talking about this, and I don't know if it's just training camp fodder. I don't know if, like, our good friend Alfred's been walking around. I bet you if I walked over to Big Al and I go, you care who the backup quarterback is? Al will drop some choice 4-letter words, and then I don't know. We'll start talking about where we're going to happy hour
earlier this week. You're right.
That's all there's. So
you have to go to your backup quarterback for any stretch of time.
Your
team's in trouble. It doesn't matter who it is.
I am much more in tune with what Sean Payton said at the podium on Wednesday when he said, and he kind of made up numbers, but my guess is that this is pretty accurate. When he said, if we're talking about 53, we probably know 44 of them pretty solid right now.
Right.
And it's about the other 9.
Mm-hmm.
And do I think that Zach Wilson and Jared Stidham could be into the discussion of what that 9 looks like? Of course. Do I think somebody could get hurt on Sunday night at the stadium? Knock on wood. And then the decision's going to be made for you for some of those 9? Yes, I do think that is going to ultimately be the case. But I do believe that right now, some of the other backup potential positions, including what you and Troy spent some time talking about earlier about the wide receiver position, is far more important than Zach Wilson versus Jared Stidham. I think the only reason it's happening is because it's the quarterback position, and that makes people excited. Shawn, I have spent most of today here at practice confused as hell. Would you like to know why?
Is it both fields going simultaneously with some sort of kind of scrimmages and drills?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, that's not what it is. Although I understand why that could be a little bit confusing. I love the way they had that set up, by the way, because it keeps the fans entertained. I have been confused as hell. And it's because when I look up and I see a yellow and green jersey kicking field goals, wearing number 2, who is not Mason Crosby, is really messing with my head, dude.
That is weird.
It's not Mason.
It's weird.
It's been Mason Crosby, I'm pretty sure, since I was in like the 2nd grade.
Yeah.
That dude has been the kicker forever. And now you've changed it on me.
No, it cracks me up.
I am so confused that it is Jalen Wayne in his 2nd year out of South Alabama, calls Spanish Fort, Alabama, his hometown.
Cool.
Shawn. He was a free agent.
I bet he was.
He was a
Undrafted.
free agent. He is 6'2". He is 210 pounds, 25 years old, by the way. Oh no, wait, no, I'm talking about the wide receiver.
Oh, okay.
Greg Joseph. I'm sorry, I was talking about the wrong number 2.
Got it.
I got my sheet mixed up here. Greg Joseph out of Florida Atlantic, coming from that bustling metropolis of kickers, Boca Raton, Florida.
My favorite thing about this whole segment right now is that Nate
Greg Joseph. I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong name.
Nate can't be bothered.
I haven't had enough coffee because I think that Myck roofied it.
You can't be bothered with the Broncos backup quarterback, but the kicker for the Packers is what's fascinating.
Danny said the same thing. It's throwing him off too. You know how weird it is to look up and see a Packers kicker wearing number 2 who's not Mason Crosby? If you're Greg Joseph, how do you not pick a different number?
Yeah, I wouldn't have done that. But, maybe you get
Mason Crosby was out there knocking through extra points with a gray beard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
It is strange.
All the rest of this joint practice, just up and see, he's right there.
Right.
Do you see him?
Yeah.
It's not Mason Crosby.
No, little.
The pride of Boulder, Colorado. Is he in the ring?
For a while.
Is he in the ring in Boulder? Okay, Danny says he thinks he is.
I think for a while, Mason Crosby, during some of the very long patches of CU football, might have been the only active Colorado player in the NFL. Felt like it for a while.
I have been so freaking confused by looking up and seeing them practicing field goals. Because for a second, I was like, I didn't think Mason Crosby was.
But let's be honest. If you're the Packers kicker, why are you going to come all the way to Colorado? And even the joint practice.
Because you're going to feel better.
Yeah, it's like I got to crack some while I'm here at altitude. Right?
That damn thing's going to fly an extra 18 to 20% through the air.
I'm gonna rip that.
I'm all about that. All right. What other comments, by the way, were coming up from all the folks throughout the week?
Well, you talk about it as the Broncos' new number 31 walks by. Of course, that's Chris Abrams-Drain, the rookie out of Iowa. As you pointed out yesterday, you called it. You read the tea leaves right. Justin Simmons goes to the Atlanta Falcons, and 1 year, $7.5 million guaranteed on an $8 million deal.
Him and Judon are going to make
up the middle. That's
Bryce
nice.
Young's life hell.
But yes, fans looking at it saying, "Well, how come the Broncos couldn't do that?" Here's the thing: the Broncos maybe could have done that. The catch is that if you're Justin Simmons, who was making more than that, you're not going to take the pay cut to stay with your same team when you are arguably their best or second best player. So when the Broncos decided to move on with Justin Simmons, you can't come back hat in hand and say, hey, could we pay you about $6 million fewer than you made last year? He's going to say, no, I'm going to go to a different team. I'm going to wait. And that's what he did. So that's why things have changed. A comment about Caden Stearns and the worry about the safety position. A reminder, Caden Stearns was released, and then the Panthers tried to pick him up, and then he failed his physical. So you get an idea of what happened with Caden Stearns there. So the Broncos going with, obviously, Brandon Jones, P.J. Locke, Jale Skinner. That'll be their 3 safety rotation. And then maybe over the game on Sunday and the final game, maybe something else will bubble up.
Hey, Greg Joseph just shanked 2 field goals.
Well, it's new to altitude.
I mean, I'm talking like those weren't close.
And he probably doesn't care because it's
he probably doesn't
practice.
either. But he sent both of them wide left.
I mean, you and I have done that. We are not great golfers, and sometimes you get on one of those long fair, get like a beautiful long fairway, and you pull out the driver, and you're just going to smash it. You just want to smash it, and maybe it just shanks and goes into the next fairway on the left, and you hook it. But it felt good anyway because you just wanted to smash it.
The other kick. Well, I threw my roster.
Yeah, that's on you.
I don't know. I know.
Keep in mind.
I totally threw my Green Bay roster. All right. So the game on Sunday evening.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, if you are going to the game on Sunday evening, keep in mind that the Rockies are at home in the afternoon. They've got a game against the Padres. And so traffic will be a pain in the butt.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind if you are going to the game on Sunday evening, a little after 6 o'clock for the kickoff with Green Bay. It'll be on all the various places. You'll be able to find it.
Okay, good.
It's on the channels, the ones with the sportsy things.
Yep.
It'll be on one of those.
I didn't have
channels.
it last week, but
that's kind of how I feel.
But I have this one now.
That's kind of how I feel when I tell people where to find the abs and the nuggets. I don't know. It's on one of those channels. You can find it somewhere with your streaming,
you can talk to your remote control now.
Your whatever your streaming service is. I'm sure you can find it. But I think Sunday night is going to be a fun game to be able to watch because I think you're going to see Bo Nix have some fun.
I think it's a coronation.
I think you're going to see Bo Nix play well.
Yeah, I do too, especially given he's not going to face a lot of the number ones. You'll have the number one offense out there. I think the Broncos will look good. I think Nix will look good, and I think we'll be talking about sometime next week. Bo Nix's name is the starter week 1. We'll only play if he plays it all in the final preseason game. It'll be a drive or two just to make sure you stay kind of loose. But yeah, I mean, this, to my mind, I think the game will be for Nix a coronation where there is no question that he's claimed that role, and that's obviously exciting for Broncos fans. But then the guys he throws to, that part is intriguing because we talk about those wide receivers, and it is a deep room. You wonder if I'm not going to suggest chicanery, but as Troy Renck came on earlier, said Devontae Bailey's dealing with a little soreness in his leg. May not be able to play in that game. You also wonder at times about this time of year, teams all of a sudden with guys that they would like to keep but aren't quite sure they can keep. Some of them come down with a boo-boo here and there that ends up with them on a little bit of an injury list. May or may not hide somebody. We'll see, but that'll be fascinating as well. So it'll be a lot of fun. Obviously, training camp now over for the Denver Broncos. It gets back to the regular grind for them next week.
This
following
camp
the game against
is
over. We're done. It's been a delight to be out here. Thanks to the Denver Broncos for having us, for their hospitality, of course, for this tent. Because you see the top of my head, that would be a lobster-colored sunburn without it.
You'd be wearing one of those helmety things.
Beekeeper hat.
The beekeeper.
Yeah.
What are those called?
I don't know.
There's an actual name for them.
Beekeeper hat.
No, there's a name for them.
Like the skull,
safari? The skull protector thing.
Oh,
no, the one that they're wearing on
Guardian
the couch.
caps.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Guardian
caps.
caps.
Get one of those. They'd be humongous.
Yes, like Guardian caps. Thank you.
Gazoo.
I want it. Bo is out here doing this weird sprinting drill right now.
Yes, but
now he's jumping on one leg.
Yeah,
getting a
little work in. But thanks for the Broncos for having us. Of course,
it looks like he's practicing if he's going to start doing some double Dutch jump rope.
I'm bringing this to all of you for
he's trying desperately to wrap up the show, folks. I'm just going to shut up now.
Well, whatever. He's the boss. So we're going to take a look at all of this over the course of the next week. Make sure you check out Cody Roark's work. Thanks for Cody for joining us. Obviously, Troy Renck. Check out the latest Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. Came out earlier today with Devon Vele being the guest. So check that out. And of course, on Fox 31, we had Myck Miller and Arran Andersen. So great to talk to all of them today. A bunch of guests taking their time out during a busy time. And thank you for taking your time out as well to spend it with us. Danny Bailey's the man that makes everything work. Really appreciate everything that Danny does on location. As you can imagine, it's even harder. And that doesn't even count all the booming speakers that are going on during the practices. So we appreciate none of this happened without Danny. Tremendous work making all of this training camp work for all of us and all of you. Danny Bailey's the guy who put it all together. For Nate Lundy, I'm Shawn Drotar. For everyone at Mile High Sports, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful and safe and very, very warm weekend. We want you back next week right here at Mile High Sports.